Okay, good morning. We are continuing Sadi Bet, Simon Sadi Bet. We're continuing with Seif Hey. Okay, so until now we discussed if milk fell on the inside of the pot of cholent or your pot of meat. Now what happens if the milk splatters and it lands on the outside of the pot? So let's read. Hey. Tipat chalav shenafla al hakadera she'etzal ha'esh mibachutz. That means that if you have a drop of milk, it splatters and it lands on the outside wall of the kadera. Okay, so just imagine you have a pot of beef cooking and it's half full. Just to make it real simple, the broth, the food, everything goes only halfway up the pot. Just as an example. Im nafla keneged tafsha. If the drop of milk hits the pot on the outside wall, opposite the liquid, the bottom half, so then ein tzarich el shishim keneged hatipa shemefafet lifnim. Right, so it's on the bottom half, it's opposite the liquid. So we're worried that maybe the tipa goes all the way through and throughout the pot. So therefore, the halacha considers that v'havei ke'ilu nafla b'tavshil. So we say that drop goes through and it's throughout the food on the inside because it's opposite the liquid, so it just travels right through. And therefore, as long as there's shishim kenegdo, it's no problem. V'im nafla b'makom hareikan. But if it's the empty part of the pot, in other words, the top half of the pot on the outside, so there's no food opposite it, right? If you were to drill a hole right through, you would see it's above the liquid. So then what happens? So we say, Vihi mefafad bedofan hakadera. So we assume the worst, that the drop of milk spreads around the pot above the liquid, ad samuch l'rotev, all the way close to the rotev. Basically, but the maximum is an area of shishim keneged the tipa. Because if it's more than shishim, then it's going to be batal within the wall to whatever's in the wall.
The area of the pot that's above.
Right, the area of the pot above the liquid. Really, we're worried about, so we're going to see the worst case scenario is basically 60 to 1. So it becomes almost 60, an area of almost 61 times that around the drop or all the way down. And we don't know exactly which direction it goes into, but basically it's about 61 times. Not exactly, I would say it's a drop less. Sometimes we're going to see, even if you say Chanan, it's 60 times 61, because now you add the 1 to the 60, but it's a drop less than 61, because if it'd be a full 60, it would be batal. So whenever we do this mathematical equation, we say it's 60 times a drop less than 61. Okay, that's just to understand. V'im nafal b'makom again. V'im nafal b'makom hareikan, it hits the outside of the pot. Or the opposite, where it's empty. It's above the line of the water of the stew. V'hi mefafet b'dofan hakadera. So we say that the milk maybe goes down all around the pot. Ad samuch l'rotev, up to the rotev. Because if it would go into the rotev, then you would include the rotev and be batal b'shishim. So we're not assuming that. We're assuming the worst, that it goes as far around the area of the kli, but less than shishim and less than the rotev.
Because it loses its ability to move.
The worst. We're assuming that it travels up to the rotev.
We'll discuss. The maximal worst possibility.
Exactly. The worst possibility is that it goes up to the rotev.
Is that it happens to spread in such a way that it's all around the pot, but never touches the water line. Right? Okay. If there's enough pot to be mavadal, then it's batal. If not, then no problem.
We'll say it over afterwards. She'ein shishim keneged atipa, and we're saying that it's not shishim keneged atipa. In other words, just a normal case. You have a splatter of milk on the outside of the pot above the water line, above halfway. In our example, so now it's going to hare. What's going to happen? Hare ne'esar oto makom hakadera. So where the milk hits the kli, we assume that the milk goes all the way through and through to the opposite side of the kli, and that entire area is now aser. Because that kli had nivla, has absorbed meat, and now you're adding milk, that area in the pot is aser mishum basar bechalav. So what's going to problem? You want to pour out of the pot. You can't pour over this area because it'll make it aser. If you pour out through this area of the pot, which this area became aser. As you pour it out, you're going to treif your own food. So that you don't want to do that. So vizeta kanto. So this is the only solution. The only solution is leave it. Turn off the flame. Let it cool down less than yatsa let it bo. V'lo yigaba. Don't touch the pot. Until it gets less than yatsa let it bo. And then you can pour it out on either side. Okay, so someone has a brilliant idea of Gershon. You can probably just scoop it out. Probably if you're super careful. I didn't see anyone discuss that. The issue is, we're going to see, you have to make sure you don't, when you put in your ladle, you're going to end up causing it, you're going to displace the water, and it's going to rise a little bit as you put in that spoon, or your siphon, or whatever you want to do. So, I don't recommend it. Maybe you can slide in a spoon, I don't know. But let's assume not. Lechatchila not to. Again, if you slide in your spoon and you take it out, it'll probably be batal b'shishim on the part that becomes aser, and b'diavad I don't see any issue. But lechatchila, there is only one solution that I know of, and that's to let it cool down. Okay. Maybe some kind of a straw. I don't know the right word to extract it. But as long as when you're doing that, you don't shake the liquid and you don't cause it to go higher. That's why while it's still hot, you can't pour it out the other side. Because when you touch it, you're going to cause vibrations and it's going to move a little bit where that pot is. Even just touching it to turn it.
Yeah, but the other side, we're assuming that the other side also got tricked.
I think we're assuming on the other side completely it didn't reach, because there's a limit. It's only going to go as far as 60 times that tipa. For it to go all the way around the other side, I don't think it's going to get that far.
60 times of pot, can I get the tipa? You don't have the problem.
Right. So by the time it gets to the other side, I think you'll be batal b'shishim.
There is no other side, though. The whole circumference is tricked.
I don't think we assume that. I don't think we assume the drop travels, it makes a beeline straight there, and that beeline is...
So that's what we assume.
Okay, so I'll read you the Shach. Maybe you're right. The Shach writes, V'nir en, it seems the mikol makom ein la'aro tatavsho. It says maybe you could pour it out the other side, but probably you shouldn't. That's not the takana. Why? Because if you pour it out that side, through that makom hakadera, the ein levatel iser lechatchila. Oh, that's to pour it out that same way. Where does he say? I saw somebody say it. It might be in this shach or not? Oh, look in Kaf Aleph. In Kaf Aleph, you can make a hole. Here he says it. You can. There's two. He says there are two ways, two possible ways to pull it out, but he rejects them lechatchila. One is you drill a hole under. I mean, who's going to do this? But you drill a hole under your pot. You'll kill it for the next time. But as you're doing that, it'll drain out. And the other option is, he says, you should be able to pour out the other side. But the reason why he says you can't do that, I guess you can take it, I'll let you take it up with the Shach. The reason why he says you can't do that is because Shema Yananea Kedera, as we already explained. Because when you... Yeah, but as soon as you touch it to pour it out, it's going to shake it. It's going to go up a little bit. Okay. All right. Let's go on. anything else important to bring out?
Shi'ar miyad. The point was shi'ar miyad hasn't gotten to the other side. It takes some time for it to spread there. That was his point. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
Well, miyad means before it gets cold.
Yeah, I don't, okay, Haga. Well, we can argue about that later. Go ahead. Haga. V'davka ima kadera yishana. Now, the main problem that we're talking about that you have to wait for it to cool down is if it's an old pot. Old pot just means it's been used before with basar. It's not its first time, because if it's first time, we're not really so concerned that the water, that the sides of the pot that are above the broth is aser. If you say it goes up, so then it's mevatel the tipa. We're assuming the liquid on the inside doesn't go up significantly, but the tipa, so the tipa is only going to be, okay, so we're talking about, the Rama points out, a pot that was used before for meat, and it means a ben yomo. Also, the post can point out, we're talking about a ben yomo. Aval, imhi chadasha, if it's a brand new pot, never used before, or an old pot that is more than 24 hours is the last time it was used, then we're not as concerned bedi evid, right? The tipa that falls on the outside is bedi evid. You didn't splash it there on purpose. So therefore, it's a case of bedi evid, and really, you don't have to be so worried. Bechol inyan, so what does he say? Ein tzarich shishim rak neged atipa shenafal alea. If you want to pour it out through the side of the pot immediately, there just has to be enough food that's shishim keneged that drop of milk. So if it's a drop of milk, you're always going to have shishim, kimat. And if it's obviously a big splash, so then it depends how much liquid's in your pot.